Welcome back to A Thread of Hope. It's with immense warmth that I bring you another emotional story that will touch your hearts deeply. Today, we meet Sierra, a young secretary of just 22 who had never been touched by a man. She worked for Damon, a 35-year-old millionaire known for his coldness in business. What Sierra didn't know was that for 2 years, he had been watching her every day, completely in love with her, but believing he was unworthy of her affection. When family pressure for an heir became unbearable, Damon made a proposal that would change everything: $3 million for her to bear the child he so desperately needed. Sierra accepted the contract, thinking it was just another business deal for him, unaware she was about to discover a love she never dreamed existed. But not everything would be so simple, and a painful revelation would test whether true love can conquer all barriers. I want to give my heartfelt thanks to each of you who follows our channel, who leaves your kind comments, who shares our stories with loved ones. You make all the difference, and if you're not yet part of our family, subscribe right now so you don't miss any of the next emotional stories we've prepared with so much love for you. And tell me in the comments, what are you doing while you listen to our stories? Are you cooking? Working? Relaxing after a tiring day? I love to know how you enjoy these moments. Now, prepare your hearts, because our story is beginning. Let's find out together how a cold contract can turn into the truest and most intense love. Sierra Jones tidied the stack of documents on the polished mahogany desk, her delicate fingers organizing each paper with the precision that had made her indispensable over the past 2 years. At 22, she was known throughout the company as the most efficient secretary who had ever worked on the 40th floor of the most imposing corporate building in New York City. Her brown hair was always pulled back into a perfect bun, her clothes were always discreet but elegant, and her green eyes were always focused on her work, making her a respected figure among all employees. Sierra never mixed her personal and professional lives, and that was one of the many qualities that set her apart from every other woman who had worked there before. "Good morning, Sierra. Are the reports from yesterday's meeting ready?" asked Chloe, one of the financial analysts, approaching the main desk with a friendly smile. Sierra looked up from her computer and smiled back, pointing to a perfectly organized folder next to the phone. "Of course, Chloe. They're all there, separated by department, and with Mr. Sterling's notes from the presentation. He asked me to especially highlight the third quarter numbers." Chloe took the folder and quickly flipped through it, impressed, as always, with Sierra's impeccable organization. "You're an angel, Sierra. I don't know how you keep everything so perfect." Sierra just smiled, turning her attention back to her computer screen, where she was organizing her boss's complex schedule. On the other side of the glass wall, Damon Sterling watched Sierra work, just as he did every day for the past 2 years. He sat in his black leather armchair, pretending to read a report, but his dark eyes were fixed on the young woman who had become the center of his thoughts and dreams. Damon was known throughout the business world as a cold, calculating man who never let emotions interfere with his deals. At 30, he had built a financial empire that impressed even his most seasoned competitors. But there, watching Sierra smile gently at Chloe, he felt his heart race in a way it hadn't in a very long time. "How can a woman be so perfect?" he thought, admiring the delicate way she stirred her coffee, the way her lips curved into a genuine smile, the way her eyes lit up when she explained something to a colleague. Sierra had no idea she was being watched with such intensity. To her, Damon Sterling was simply her boss, a smart and demanding man, but always respectful and fair in his expectations. She had noticed some strange gestures from him over the months. There were always fresh flowers on her desk on Mondays. Her favorite coffee would mysteriously appear on her desk when she was most tired, and he would always protect her from difficult clients or bothersome colleagues. He's just a thoughtful boss, Sierra thought, never imagining that each of those gestures was the result of a deep and silent love that grew in Damon's heart with each passing day. She continued typing the week's schedule, focused on doing everything perfectly, as she always did. When the clock struck noon, Sierra organized her desk and grabbed her simple handbag. To go to lunch, it was always like this. She would leave promptly, eat alone at a small restaurant nearby, read a few pages of a book, and return exactly an hour later. Damon knew this routine by heart, and always invented an excuse to pass by the reception desk just as she was returning, just to see her smiling and greeting everyone with her natural kindness. "Good afternoon, Mr. Sterling," Sierra would say whenever she saw him, with that smile that made his heart beat dangerously fast. "Good afternoon, Sierra. How was lunch?" he would reply, trying to sound casual, when in fact he wanted to ask about her dreams, her fears, her plans for the future. "It was great. Thank you. Do you need anything?" Sierra always offered her help with genuine sincerity, and Damon always replied that everything was fine, when in fact he needed her more than he needed air to breathe. At night, when the office was empty and only the light from Sierra's desk still shone, Damon would watch her finish the day's last reports. Sierra always stayed until everything was perfectly organized for the next day, even if it meant staying late. "Sierra, you can go home. I'll finish this tomorrow," Damon would say, appearing beside her desk with a worried expression. "Don't worry, Mr. Sterling. I'm almost done, and I prefer to have everything ready today," she would reply, focused on her computer screen. Damon would stay there for a few minutes, inventing reasons not to leave, admiring her dedication, the way she lightly bit her lower lip when she was concentrating, the way her fingers danced gracefully over the keyboard. When Sierra finally shut down her computer and got up to leave, Damon felt as if an important part of his day was coming to an end. In her small but cozy apartment, Sierra would make a cup of tea and sit in her favorite armchair with a book. She lived a simple, quiet life, without great luxuries, but content with her independence and achievements. She had never had a serious boyfriend, not because she wasn't attractive, but because she had always prioritized her studies, and then her work. "One day I'll find someone special," she would think sometimes, never imagining that someone special spent his nights in his luxurious penthouse, dreaming of her, imagining what it would be like to wake up next to her every morning, what it would be like to hear her laugh in his home, what it would be like to build a life together. Damon had fallen madly in love with Sierra from the first day she came for her interview, but he considered himself unworthy of a woman as pure and special as her. The sound of the doorbell echoed through the Sterling mansion at 7 a.m. on a rainy Monday. Damon came down the marble stairs, still in his silk robe, knowing exactly who his morning visitor would be. Edward Sterling, his 68-year-old father, stood at the front entrance with his usual severe expression, holding a briefcase of documents and a cup of coffee the butler had offered. "Damon, we need to talk, now." Edward's voice was firm and authoritative, just as it always was when it came to family and business matters. Damon sighed deeply, gesturing toward the private study, knowing the conversation would not be pleasant. "Dad, it's 7 in the morning. Can't we talk about this later?" Edward shook his head, entering the study and positioning himself behind the mahogany desk that had belonged to the family for 3 generations. "Damon, you are 35 years old, and you still haven't given me a grandson. The Sterling Company needs an heir to continue our lineage." Edward opened the briefcase and spread several documents across the desk, pointing to specific clauses that Damon knew by heart. "Your grandfather made it very clear in his will. If you do not have a child by your 36th birthday, a controlling stake in the company passes to your cousin Robert. You have less than a year, Damon." Edward's tone was a mix of frustration and desperation, something Damon rarely saw in his father. Damon sat down heavily in a leather armchair, running his hands through his dark hair, feeling the weight of generations of family expectations on his shoulders. "Dad, I know about the clauses, but I can't just go looking for a woman to have a child with me. That's not how things work." Edward slammed his fist on the desk, making the documents tremble. "That's not how things work. Damon, our family built this empire over 100 years. Are you going to let all of this be lost because of romance?" Edward began to pace back and forth across the study, gesticulating with his hands agitatedly. "Your cousin Robert is married, has 2 children, and is waiting for you to fail so he can take what is rightfully ours. Do you think he will maintain our values, our way of working? He'll destroy everything we've built in less than 5 years." Damon knew Robert well enough to know his father was right. His cousin had always been jealous of Damon's position in the company and would not hesitate to make drastic changes once he took control. "I understand the situation, Dad, but I can't force feelings that don't exist. I can't just marry any woman to have an heir." Edward stopped pacing and stared at his son, his expression becoming even more serious. "Then you need to find a solution, Damon. Be it marriage, be it an arrangement, be it whatever is necessary. You have 10 months. Edward gathered the documents and put them back in the briefcase, his voice taking on a final tone that Damon knew well. "I will not allow our family to lose everything because of your indecision. If you can't resolve this yourself, I'll start looking for suitable candidates for you." Damon stood up abruptly, feeling a mixture of anger and despair. "Dad, you can't do that. You can't just choose a woman for me as if we were in the Middle Ages." Edward walked to the door, stopping only to look back one last time. "I can, and I will if necessary. 10 months, Damon. Don't disappoint me." The sound of the door closing echoed through the study, leaving Damon alone with his turbulent thoughts and a pressure that seemed to be crushing his chest. 2 hours later, Damon was in his office at the company, pretending to read reports while watching Sierra organize the day's schedule. She was wearing a simple navy blue dress that brought out her green eyes, and her hair was tied back in a low ponytail that left a few strands framing her delicate face. "Good morning, Mr. Sterling. You have 3 meetings today. One at 10 with the Japanese investors, another at 2 with the marketing department, and the last at 4 with the lawyers about the expansion contract." Sierra spoke in her soft professional voice, jotting down important details in her electronic planner. Damon watched her speak, thinking about how different his life would be if he could just tell her what he felt, if he could ask her to marry him, if he could build a family with the woman he loved. "Thank you, Sierra. You always organize everything so perfectly." He smiled at her, a genuine smile that made Sierra's heart flutter slightly, though she didn't understand why. All morning, Damon tried to focus on important meetings and decisions, but his mind kept returning to 2 things: his father's pressure and the woman sitting on the other side of the glass wall. Sierra continued to work with her usual efficiency, answering phones, organizing documents, coordinating meetings, completely unaware of the storm, raging in her boss's mind. What if I talked to her? Damon thought during the meeting with the Japanese investors. What if I told her about my situation? What if I found out if she would feel something for me? But every time he thought about approaching Sierra, he remembered her purity, her organized and peaceful life, how unfair it would be to involve her in his family problems. "She deserves someone better than me," he always concluded, turning his attention back to the spreadsheets and charts that seemed unimportant compared to the dilemma he was facing. At the end of the day, when the office was almost empty and Sierra was finishing her last emails, Damon made a decision that would change everything. He watched her for a few minutes, admiring her concentration, her natural beauty, the delicate way she touched the computer keys. Sierra is the most incredible woman I have ever met, he thought, feeling his heart tighten with love and despair. She is smart, kind, pure, everything I have ever dreamed of in a woman. If I have to have a child to keep the company, there is no one in the world I would rather have that child with. The idea was terrifying, and, at the same time, the only solution that made sense to him. But how am I going to tell her? How am I going to propose something like this without sounding like a crazy person or an opportunist? Damon ran a hand over his face, knowing he was about to make the riskiest decision of his life. I will make a professional offer. I will offer a value she cannot refuse. And maybe, just maybe, during this process, she'll find out that I love her more than my own life. What do you think of Damon's difficult decision? Is it a loving gamble or a selfish mistake? And what do you think is going through Sierra's mind right now? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more exciting stories. It was a Friday at 7 in the evening when Damon finally gathered the courage to ask Sierra to talk privately. The office was completely silent, only the emergency lights illuminating the empty hallways, and Sierra was organizing the day's last documents when she heard her boss's voice calling her name. "Sierra, could you come to my office, please? I need to talk to you about something important." Damon stood at his office door, his tie already loosened, the sleeves of his white shirt rolled up, showing that it had been a long, tiring day for him as well. Sierra saved the document she was editing, grabbed her notepad, and walked to his office, feeling a strange tension in the air that she couldn't explain. "Of course, Mr. Sterling. Is there a problem with one of the projects?" she asked, sitting in the chair across from his desk, crossing her legs elegantly and preparing to take any necessary notes. Damon closed the door behind him and walked to his chair, but didn't sit down immediately. Instead, he stood beside the window that overlooked the illuminated city of New York, his hands in his pockets, clearly nervous in a way Sierra had never seen before. "Sierra, before I say what I need to say, I want you to know that I have the utmost respect for you as a professional and as a person. You are the best secretary I have ever had, and your efficiency and dedication are unmatched." He turned to face her, his dark eyes showing an intensity that made Sierra's heart race without her understanding why. "What I'm about to propose to you is something completely out of the ordinary, something that goes beyond our professional relationship, and I want you to know that you have complete freedom to refuse without it affecting your job in any way." Sierra frowned slightly, her curiosity piqued by the unusual seriousness in his voice and the way he was avoiding her direct gaze. "Mr. Sterling, you're making me worried. What happened?" Sierra leaned slightly forward, her hands clutching her notepad, trying to decipher the expression on his face. Damon took a deep breath, walked to his chair, and finally sat down, resting his elbows on the desk and clasping his hands in front of his face. "Sierra, my family has certain expectations regarding the future of the company, expectations that involve the continuation of the Sterling lineage." He paused, watching her confused face, knowing he was about to completely change the dynamic between them. "I need to have a child, Sierra, and I need to have this child in the next 10 months, or I will lose control of the company to my cousin." Sierra blinked several times, trying to process what she had just heard, without completely understanding where this conversation was leading. I'm so sorry, Mr. Sterling. I didn't know you were under this pressure, but I don't understand how this involves me." Damon stood up again and walked to the small bar in a corner of his office, pouring 2 glasses of water, more to buy time than from real thirst. "What I'm about to propose to you will sound strange, Sierra, maybe even inappropriate, but I want you to consider it a business proposal, nothing more." He walked back to the desk and placed one of the glasses in front of her, his hands trembling slightly from nervousness. "I am offering $3 million for you to help me solve this problem." Sierra almost knocked over the glass of water, her green eyes widening in shock. "$3 million? Mr. Sterling, I don't understand. How can I help you have a child?" Damon sat down again, this time looking directly into her eyes, knowing there was no turning back. "I'm asking you to be the mother of this child, Sierra. I'm asking you to have a child of mine." The silence that followed was deafening, with only the distant sound of city traffic reaching them through the 40th floor windows. Sierra remained completely still for several seconds, her brain trying to process what she had just heard. "You're asking me to have your child?" Her voice came out as a whisper, almost inaudible, and she could feel her heart pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. Damon nodded slowly, trying to maintain a professional expression, even though inside he was terrified of her reaction. "It would be a purely professional arrangement, Sierra. $3 million, full medical care, all the support you need during the pregnancy. After the child is born, you would be free to do whatever you wanted with your life." Sierra stood up abruptly, starting to pace back and forth across the room, one of her hands pressed against her forehead, trying to organize her thoughts. "Mr. Sterling, this is completely surreal. You're asking me to be some kind of surrogate?" Damon felt a pang of pain at hearing the expression, but he nodded. "In practical terms, yes. It would be a contract with all the necessary legal clauses." Sierra stopped pacing and turned to face him, her expression showing a mix of shock, confusion, and something Damon couldn't identify. "Why me, Mr. Sterling? Why not look for someone who specializes in this? There are clinics, agencies that handle this kind of situation." Damon had prepared for this question, but still felt his throat go dry. "Because I trust you, Sierra. Because I know you are an honest, responsible, smart person. Because—" He hesitated, almost confessing his true feelings, but controlled himself at the last second. "Because I believe you would care for the child with the affection they deserve during the pregnancy." Sierra sat down again, her legs suddenly weak, and picked up the glass of water with trembling hands. $3 million, she repeated, as if she were testing how the words sounded in her voice. "That's a lot of money, Mr. Sterling. Enough money for me to never have to worry about anything again for the rest of my life." Damon watched the emotions cross her face, waiting patiently for her to process all the information. "I know it's a big decision, Sierra. I don't expect an answer now. Take all the time you need to think about it." Sierra took a sip of water, trying to moisten her throat, which had gone dry with nervousness. "Mr. Sterling, I need to understand some things. How would the process work? How would it work in practice?" Damon had prepared answers for these questions as well, although discussing them made his heart beat dangerously fast. "It would be natural, Sierra, not through medical procedures. Discreet meetings until conception happens. After that, you would have complete freedom to live your life normally, with all the necessary support." Sierra felt her face heat up as she fully understood what he was suggesting. "You're talking about intimate relations between us?" Damon nodded, trying to keep his voice steady. "Yes, it would be the most natural and effective way." Sierra was silent for a long moment, looking at her hands clasped in her lap. I've never been with a man like that, Mr. Sterling." The confession came out lower than she intended, and she felt her cheeks flush intensely. The revelation hit Damon like lightning, confirming what he had already suspected about Sierra's purity. "I understand, Sierra, and that makes your consideration even more significant to me. I promise I would be respectful, careful, that I would do everything to make you feel comfortable." Sierra looked up to meet his eyes, and for a moment something passed between them that neither could fully identify. $3 million, she repeated again, her mind already calculating all the possibilities that this amount could open up in her life. Can I have a few days to think about it? Damon nodded immediately. Of course. Take all the time you need. And remember, regardless of your decision, it will not affect your job here. Sierra stood up slowly, picked up her bag, and walked to the door. Thank you for your trust, Mr. Sterling. I'll think carefully about your proposal. When she left the room, Damon was left alone, not knowing if he had just made the biggest mistake of his life, or if he had taken the first step toward the future he secretly desired more than anything else in the world. What do you think is going through Sierra's mind right now? How will she make this impossible decision? And will she be able to separate business from her budding feelings for her boss? Share your ideas in the comments below. 3 days after the conversation that changed everything between them, Sierra knocked on Damon's office door with a serious and determined expression. During those 3 days, she had thought about every aspect of his proposal, calculated every possibility, and come to the conclusion that $3 million was enough to guarantee her financial independence for the rest of her life. Mr. Sterling, may I speak with you? Damon looked up from the documents he was pretending to read. In truth, he had spent the last 3 days completely unable to focus on anything other than her answer. Of course, Sierra. Come in and close the door, please. His voice tried to sound casual, but there was an obvious tension that Sierra did not fail to notice. She sat in the same chair as 3 days ago, took a deep breath, and faced him directly. I accept your proposal, Mr. Sterling, but I would like to discuss a few details before we formalize any agreement. Damon felt his heart race, a mixture of relief, happiness, and nervousness taking over his entire being. Are you sure, Sierra? I want you to know you can change your mind at any time if you don't feel comfortable. Damon leaned forward, his hands resting on the desk, watching every expression on her face. Sierra replied firmly, although he could see a slight tremble in her hands. I am sure, but I need to understand how it will work in practice. Where would these meetings happen? How would we know when to try? Damon had thought of every detail during those 3 days of waiting. There's a reserved apartment, completely private and discreet. As for the timing, we can consult with a doctor to determine your most fertile periods. Sierra felt her face heat up again as she discussed something so intimate with her boss, but she forced herself to maintain her professional composure. And after I get pregnant, how would the rest of the pregnancy work? Damon hesitated for a moment, knowing his answer would reveal more about his feelings than he intended. I would like to be a part of the pregnancy, if you would allow it. Medical appointments, exams, everything necessary to ensure you and the baby are well. The following Friday, Sierra found herself in front of the most luxurious residential building she had ever seen. Damon was waiting for her in the lobby, wearing casual clothes that made him look younger and more approachable than in the office. Sierra, thank you for coming. I know this must be strange for us or for you. He guided her to the private elevator, his fingers almost touching hers when he pressed the button for the top floor. I'm nervous, Sierra admitted as they ascended, her voice lower than usual. Me too, Damon replied, looking at her with a tenderness that made her heart race inexplicably. When the elevator doors opened directly into the penthouse, Sierra was speechless. The apartment was elegant yet cozy, with large windows that offered a stunning view of the city, fresh flowers in several places, and an atmosphere that in no way resembled a purely professional meeting. Would you like something to drink? Water, wine, something to help you relax? Damon was clearly as nervous as she was, his hands slightly trembling as he gestured toward the comfortable living room sofa. Sierra sat on the edge of the couch, her back straight, trying to maintain her composure. Water would be great, thank you, When Damon returned from the kitchen with 2 glasses, he sat down next to her, but kept a respectful distance. "Sierra, I want you to know that we can go at your pace. There's no rush for anything." She drank a sip of water, watching his profile as he looked out the window. "Mr. Sterling, can I ask you a personal question?" He turned to face her, nodding. "Why did you never remarry? I mean, after you lost your wife?" Damon was silent for a long moment, a shadow of pain passing through his eyes. "I never found anyone who made me feel it was worth trying again," he replied, without mentioning that he had found that person 2 years ago, but she was sitting next to him without knowing it. Sierra studied his face, realizing for the first time the loneliness he carried behind his professional facade. It must be hard to carry that responsibility alone. The company, the family pressure, everything. Damon turned fully to her, surprised by the understanding in her voice. "It is. Sometimes I wonder if it's worth keeping all of this, if I don't have anyone to share it with." Sierra felt something stir in her chest, a compassion that went beyond what she had planned to feel. "You're not alone now," she said softly, reaching out to lightly touch his arm. The contact sent an electric current through both of them, and Damon looked at her small hand on his arm, as if it were the most precious thing in the world. "Sierra," he whispered, his voice heavy with an emotion she couldn't fully identify. "Yes," she replied without pulling her hand away, hypnotized by the intensity in his dark eyes. Damon leaned slowly toward her, giving her time to pull away if she wanted to. But Sierra remained still, her heart beating so fast she was sure he could hear it. When his lips touched hers, it was with a gentleness she had never imagined existed. The kiss was soft, respectful, but filled with a restrained passion that made Sierra feel as if she were melting. When they parted, both were breathing unevenly, Damon's eyes searching for any sign of regret on her face. It was nice," Sierra whispered, her cheeks flushed, one of her hands unconsciously touching her own lips. "For me too," Damon replied, his voice hoarse with emotion. "More than nice." They looked at each other in silence for several seconds, both knowing that something had changed between them, something that went far beyond the professional agreement they had made. What happened next was very different from what both had imagined. Instead of the mechanical coldness Sierra had expected, Damon treated her as if she were made of glass, his hands exploring her every curve, with a reverence that left her breathless. "You are beautiful," he murmured against her neck, his words sending shivers all over her skin. "So perfect." Sierra had never felt desired in that way, had never experienced the intensity of the feelings that coursed through her body as Damon kissed and caressed her with careful passion. When they finally gave themselves completely to each other, it was with an intimacy that surprised both of them. Sierra getting lost in sensations she didn't know existed, and Damon fighting the urge to confess his eternal love for her. Afterward, as she rested in his arms, Damon stroked her hair and watched her quiet breathing, knowing that he was completely lost, that there was no turning back for him. "How do you feel?" he asked softly, his fingers tracing lazy circles on her bare arm. Sierra looked up to meet his eyes, an expression of vulnerability and confusion on her face. "Confused," she admitted honestly. "It wasn't supposed to be like this, was it?" Damon knew exactly what she meant. "No," he replied, his voice filled with an emotion he could no longer hide. "It wasn't supposed to be like this." They fell silent, both knowing they had crossed a line that would change everything between them, but neither knowing exactly what that meant for the future. Sierra snuggled closer to him, allowing herself for the first time in her life to feel completely safe in a man's arms, while Damon closed his eyes and allowed himself to dream, just for a few moments, that this incredible woman could truly be his forever. Why do you think Damon waited so long to make a move, And what do you think is the real reason Sierra said yes to his proposal? Do you think a relationship born from a contract can truly succeed? Share your thoughts in the comments below and like this video if you're enjoying our story. 2 weeks had passed since that first night, and the meetings between Sierra and Damon had become something completely different from what either of them had imagined. Sierra arrived at the penthouse apartment on that Thursday evening and found the table set for dinner, with candles lit, fresh flowers, and the aroma of a home-cooked meal coming from the kitchen. "Mr. Sterling," she called out, placing her bag on the sofa and walking toward the sounds coming from the kitchen. "Damon," he corrected her, appearing at the kitchen door with an apron tied around his waist and a smile she had never seen at the office before. "When we're here, we're just Damon and Sierra, no formalities." Sierra felt her heart race at seeing him in such a domestic and welcoming way, completely different from the cold executive everyone knew. "You cooked?" she asked, approaching to see the beautifully set table. "I tried," he replied with a soft laugh. "I hope you like lasagna, because it was the only thing I could make without burning." Sierra laughed, a genuine and happy sound that made Damon feel as if his chest would explode with happiness. During dinner, they talked about everything except the official reason they were there. Damon told her about his childhood, about what it was like to grow up under the pressure of being the Sterling heir, about the dreams he had before taking over the company. Sierra talked about her parents, about how difficult it had been to lose them both in an accident when she was 18, about how she had fought to get her job, and her independence. "You are much stronger than you think," Damon said, his eyes fixed on her as she spoke. "To lose your parents so young and still manage to build a stable life on your own, that takes a kind of courage few people have." Sierra felt tears forming in her eyes, touched by the sincerity in his voice. "Sometimes I don't feel strong. Sometimes I feel very alone." Damon reached across the table and covered her hand with his, gently. "You're not alone now," he said, repeating the words she had said to him weeks ago. "Not while I'm here." The moment was so intimate and true that they both completely forgot that this was supposed to be just a business deal. After dinner, they went out to the balcony that overlooked the city lights. Damon offered his jacket when he noticed Sierra was cold, and she wrapped herself in the fabric that carried his scent, feeling strangely comfortable and protected. "Sierra, can I confess something to you?" Damon was standing beside her at the railing, watching her delicate profile under the soft starlight. "Of course," she replied, turning to face him. "I didn't expect it to be like this. I didn't expect to feel connected to you in this way." Sierra felt her heart skip a beat. "Connected how?" she asked, although she already knew the answer deep down in her heart. Damon hesitated for a moment, knowing he was about to confess something that could change everything between them. "I fell in love with you, Sierra. Not now. Not because of these meetings. 2 years ago, from the very first day you walked into my office." The confession came out as a whisper, but it was clearly heard by Sierra's heart, which stopped beating for a moment before racing at a frantic pace. 2 years? Sierra turned fully to face him, her green eyes shining with surprise and emotion. "Are you serious?" Damon nodded, running a hand through his dark hair, a nervous gesture she had learned to recognize. "All those little gestures, the coffee, the flowers, the way you always protected me from difficult clients, all of that was because I love you," he finished for her, his voice getting firmer as he spoke. "Because I wake up every day thinking about you. Because I invent excuses to pass by your desk. Because I dream of a future where you are my wife, not just the mother of my child." Sierra was speechless for several seconds, processing the magnitude of what he had just revealed. "Damon, I didn't know. I thought you just saw me as an efficient employee." He laughed softly, but it was a sound filled with emotion. Efficient? Sierra, you are the most incredible woman I have ever met. You are smart, kind, pure, everything I ever dreamed of finding in someone. Then why did you never say anything before? Why wait until now? Sierra was trying to understand why he had kept these feelings for so long. Damon lowered his eyes, an expression of vulnerability taking over his face. Because I didn't feel worthy of you. Because you are too good, too pure for someone like me. Because I didn't want to ruin your perfect life with my family problems and pressures. Sierra felt her heartache at the pain in his eyes. Damon, you don't get to decide what's good for me. That's my choice. She moved closer to him, placing a hand on his face, forcing him to look at her. And what if I told you I don't think my life is so perfect? What if I told you that sometimes I look at you in the office and I feel something I can't explain? Damon's eyes widened with hope. What are you saying? He whispered, barely daring to believe what he was hearing. I'm saying that maybe I have feelings for you too. Feelings that I didn't understand, because I never imagined you could see me as anything more than your secretary. Sierra was being completely honest, admitting to herself for the first time that she had always been attracted to Damon, but had suppressed those feelings because she believed they were impossible. Sierra. Damon pulled her into his arms, holding her as if she were the most precious thing in the world. You have no idea how happy your words make me. He kissed her then, but this time it was not the careful, respectful kiss of before. It was a kiss filled with 2 years of pent-up love, of desire, of hope, and of relief at finally being able to express his true feelings. Sierra responded with the same intensity, allowing herself for the first time to fully feel what had grown in her heart. When they parted, both were breathing heavily, and Damon rested his forehead on hers. I love you, he said again, this time with all the certainty in the world. I love you so much it physically hurts when you're not around. Sierra smiled, tears of happiness streaming down her cheeks. I love you too, she whispered, the words coming out naturally, as if they had always been there, waiting to be said. I love you, Damon. They kissed again, and then he led her inside, to the room where everything had begun as a business deal, but which had now become the place where two hearts finally found each other. That night, when they made love, it was different from all the other times. There were no more contracts or agreements between them, only pure and true love being expressed in the most intimate way possible. The next morning, Sierra woke up in Damon's arms, feeling a completeness she had never experienced before. Good morning, my love, he murmured against her hair, his words making her heart melt. Good morning, she replied, turning to kiss him softly. Damon, what does this mean for us? For the agreement? For everything? He held her closer, his eyes serious and full of love. It means there is no more agreement, Sierra. No more contracts or payments. There is just the two of us and the love we feel for each other. Sierra felt immense happiness take over her being. And what if I get pregnant? She asked. Then we'll raise our child together, like a real family, as husband and wife, if you'll have me. Damon looked at her with such tenderness that Sierra felt as if her heart would overflow. Yes, she whispered. I want to. And in that moment, they both knew they had found something much more valuable than any financial agreement. They had found true love. 3 weeks after that transformative night on the balcony, Sierra was in her apartment bathroom, staring at the pregnancy test she had just taken. 2 distinct pink lines confirmed what her body had already been signaling for a few days. She was pregnant. Her hands trembled slightly, as she held the small object that would change their lives forever, and tears of joy began to stream down her cheeks. Damon is going to be so happy, she thought, remembering how he had whispered about dreaming of a family in recent weeks. Sierra put the test in her purse and headed to the office, barely able to contain her anxiety to tell the man she loved the news. During the entire bus ride, she imagined his reaction, how his eyes would shine, how he would hug her and spin her in the air, just as he had done the night before, when she had told him she loved him for the 10th time that week. Damon was in a meeting when Sierra arrived at the office, but she managed to send him a discreet message. "I need to talk to you urgently. I have important news." Damon replied in a few minutes. "I'll be done with the meeting in 15 minutes. I'll meet you in the office." Sierra spent those 15 minutes trying to focus on her usual tasks, but it was impossible to focus on anything but the life growing inside her and the happiness she was about to share with Damon. When he finally appeared at her office door, with that special smile he only reserved for her, Sierra felt her heart race even faster. "What happened, my love? You look radiant today," he said, closing the door behind him and walking toward her. Sierra stood up, took the test from her purse, and placed it on the desk between them, without saying a word. Damon looked at the object for a few seconds, processing what he was seeing, before his eyes widened completely. "Sierra, does this mean—" Damon picked up the test with trembling hands, looking at the 2 lines as if it were the most precious thing he had ever seen. "I'm pregnant," she whispered, watching every expression on his face. "We're going to have a baby." Damon dropped the test on the desk and pulled her into his arms in a hug so tight it almost took her breath away. "Sierra, my God, Sierra!" He spun her in the air, exactly as she had imagined, their laughter mixing in pure joy. When he put her back down, there were tears in his eyes, tears of happiness that he didn't try to hide. "I love you so much," he murmured, kissing her face, her hands, any part of her he could reach. "I love you, and I love our baby already." Sierra laughed through her own tears, never having felt so loved and complete. "We're going to be parents, Damon, a real family." He held her face in his hands, looking deeply into her eyes. "The happiest family in the world," he replied, before kissing her with all the passion and love he felt. In the days that followed, Damon transformed into the most dedicated and protective future father Sierra could imagine. He canceled a business trip to London, citing unavoidable commitments. He reorganized his schedule to accompany her to her first doctor's appointment and began obsessively researching pregnancy, nutrition, and baby care. "Damon, you don't have to cancel important meetings for me," Sierra said when she found out about the canceled trip. "Sierra, there is nothing more important in the world than you and our baby," he replied, kissing her forehead tenderly. "The company can wait. My family cannot." The word family always made Sierra's heart race, still in disbelief at how quickly their lives had changed and intertwined so deeply and truly. The first doctor's appointment was a magical moment for both of them. Damon held Sierra's hand throughout the consultation, asking the doctor detailed questions about every aspect of the pregnancy, what precautions they should take, and what tests were necessary. When they heard the baby's heartbeat for the first time, Damon started to cry openly, squeezing Sierra's hand as he whispered, "It's our child, Sierra. It's really our child." Sierra also cried, watching the strong, powerful man she knew completely melt upon hearing the quick, strong sound of their baby's heart. "Doctor, is he okay? Is everything normal?" Damon asked, his voice full of paternal concern. "Everything is perfect," the doctor replied with a smile. "You have a very healthy baby growing in there." Damon kissed Sierra's hand repeatedly, murmuring, "Thank you," as if she had given him the greatest gift in the universe. From that day on, Damon became even more thoughtful and affectionate. He would appear at Sierra's apartment every morning with a special breakfast for pregnant women, full of vitamins and nutrients he had researched as being important for the baby's development. "You don't have to do this every day," Sierra would protest, although she secretly loved being pampered that way. "I want to," he would reply, kissing her belly that still showed no signs of pregnancy. "I want to take care of my woman and my child in the best way possible." Sierra melted every time he referred to her as my woman, especially because they had not yet made anything official, but he treated her as if they had been married for years. "Damon, about us and the future," she began one morning as they had coffee together. "Marry me," he interrupted, taking her hands in his. "I know it's early. I know everything happened very fast, but I love you more than anything in this world, and I want you to be my wife officially." Sierra was speechless for a few seconds, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. "Are you sure? Aren't you being too hasty?" she asked, although every fiber of her being wanted to scream yes immediately. "Sierra, I've been dreaming of you for 2 years. I spend my days thinking about you, my nights dreaming of our future together. There's nothing hasty about this." Damon stood up and knelt beside her chair, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. "I bought this last week after we found out about the baby. I wanted to do this officially." He opened the box, revealing the most beautiful ring Sierra had ever seen. A perfect diamond, surrounded by small stones that sparkled like stars. "Sierra Jones, will you marry me? Will you be my wife, the mother of my children, my partner for life?" Sierra was crying before she could even answer, nodding vigorously as she held out her trembling hand to him. "Yes," she managed to whisper. "Yes, I will. I love you so much, Damon." When he slid the ring onto her finger, Sierra felt as if her life was finally complete. "It's perfect," she said, admiring how the ring fit her hand perfectly. "You are perfect," Damon replied, getting up to kiss her passionately. "You and our baby are everything I've ever wanted, everything I've ever dreamed of." They spent the rest of the morning making plans for the future, where they would live, what the wedding would be like, how they would decorate the baby's room. "I want our home to be full of love and laughter," Sierra said, her head resting on Damon's chest as he stroked her hair. "I want our child to grow up knowing how loved he is." Damon kissed the top of her head, his heart overflowing with happiness. "Our child will be the most loved child in the world," he promised, "and you will be the most loved wife in the universe." In those moments, they were both absolutely certain that they had found their forever, that nothing could shake the perfect happiness they were building together. Sierra was organizing some documents at the reception desk when she heard firm, authoritative footsteps echoing down the hallway. It was a Tuesday afternoon, and Damon had gone out for a meeting with investors, leaving her alone in the office with only a few employees from the finance department. When she looked up, she saw Edward Sterling walking toward her with a grim expression that immediately made her nervous. "Sierra Jones?" he asked, his voice sharp and cold, stopping right in front of her desk. "Yes, Mr. Sterling. How can I help you?" Sierra replied, trying to maintain her professional composure, although something in his tone made her feel an uncomfortable chill. Edward looked her up and down with a calculating, disapproving gaze that made her feel as if she were being judged and found wanting. "I need to talk to you, now, in the meeting room." It wasn't a request. It was an order, and Sierra felt her stomach churn, a bad feeling taking over her. "Mr. Damon isn't here at the moment, but I can schedule a meeting for when he gets back," she tried, hoping to avoid any confrontation until Damon was present to support her. It's not my son I need to talk to. It's you, and it's about him." Edward was already walking toward the meeting room, clearly expecting her to follow. Sierra hesitated for a moment, but she knew she had no choice. She saved the document she was working on, grabbed her notepad, and followed him, feeling as if she were walking into a trap. When they entered the room and Edward closed the door behind them, Sierra felt the air grow heavy, charged with a tension that made her want to run out of there. "Sit," Edward ordered, pointing to a chair on the opposite side of the table, where he positioned himself, as if he were a judge about to pass sentence. "Mr. Sterling, if there's a problem with my work," Sierra began, trying to understand the purpose of the conversation. "Your work?" Edward laughed, but it was a humorless sound, full of disdain. "We are not here to talk about your work as a secretary, Sierra. We're here to talk about your other job, the job my son is paying you $3 million for." Sierra felt as if she had been punched in the stomach. The blood drained from her face, and she had to grip the chair to keep from fainting. I don't understand," she lied, though she knew exactly what he was talking about. Edward opened a briefcase he had brought with him and spread several documents across the table, including copies of the contract she and Damon had signed. "You don't understand? Then let me clarify. You are a surrogate, hired to bear an heir for my family. Nothing more, nothing less." His words were like daggers in Sierra's heart, reducing everything she had experienced with Damon to a cold, calculating business transaction. "Did you forget about this, Sierra? Did you forget you're being paid to do a specific job?" Edward leaned forward, his cold eyes fixed on her as if he were a predator watching his prey. "My son may have gotten confused. He may have mixed feelings with business, yes, but I don't get confused. I know exactly what you are and what your purpose here is. Mr. Sterling, what's between your son and me goes beyond the contract," Sierra tried, her voice trembling, fighting back the tears that threatened to fall. "Beyond the contract!" Edward slammed his hand on the table, making Sierra jump in fright. "There is nothing beyond the contract. You were hired to get pregnant and deliver a child. Period. Anything else you imagine exists is just your fantasy." He picked up one of the pages of the contract and threw it toward her. "Read Clause 7, Sierra. Read it and tell me what it says about your future at the Sterling Company." Sierra picked up the paper with trembling hands and read the words she had been trying to forget ever since she had fallen in love with Damon. The contractor agrees to resign from her position at Sterling Limited after the birth of the child. She also waives any right to future contact with the child or the contractor. The words seemed to jump off the page, echoing in her mind like a death sentence for all the dreams she had built in recent weeks. $3 million, Sierra. That's your price. That's the value we placed on your belly and your uterus. Edward was being deliberately cruel, every word chosen to hurt and humiliate. Did you really think my son would fall in love with a common secretary? That a family like ours would accept someone like you? Sierra felt the tears finally escape, rolling down her cheeks as the raw reality of his words clashed with all the beautiful moments she had lived with Damon. "Damon loves me," she whispered, more to herself than to Edward. "He told me he loves me." Edward laughed again, a sound that chilled Sierra's blood. "Damon says many things when he's desperate. He needed an heir. You were available and willing. He did what he needed to do to get what he wanted." Edward stood up and walked to the window, his hands clasped behind his back. "My son has always been good at charming women when he needs something from them. It's a family talent." "You're lying," Sierra said, trying to find strength in her voice, although inside she was falling apart. "Damon isn't like that. He wouldn't use me in that way." Edward turned to face her, an expression of false pity on his face. "Poor Sierra. You really believe that, don't you? You really think a man like Damon Sterling, heir to a multi-billion-dollar empire, would give up everything for a secretary who is carrying his child for money? He returned to the table and picked up another document. Here is my father's will, Sierra. Damon loses everything if he doesn't have an heir by his 36th birthday. Everything. The company, the fortune, the family name. Do you think he would risk losing billions for love? Sierra looked at the document, seeing the clauses that Damon had mentioned briefly, but which now seemed much more menacing and final. Will he choose you, or will he choose to preserve his family's legacy? You, or the dozens of employees who depend on the company to survive? You, or the responsibility he has carried for generations? Edward sat down again, his voice taking on a softer, but no less poisonous tone. Sierra, you seem to be a smart girl. Don't delude yourself into thinking you're special. You're a means to an end, nothing more. Damon will do what's necessary to get his heir, including making you believe he loves you. He opened the desk drawer and took out an envelope. Here are the documents for your transfer. You will be relocated to our London branch as soon as you give birth. A very well-paid position, far from here, far from Damon, far from any temptation to cause problems for our family. Sierra looked at the envelope as if it were a poisonous snake. I won't accept this. Damon wouldn't agree to this. Edward sighed as if dealing with a stubborn child. Damon doesn't need to agree, Sierra. When the time comes, when he has to choose between you and his inheritance, you will find out who he really is. And on that day, you'll be grateful that I prepared a dignified way out for you. Sierra stood up abruptly, her legs wobbly, but determined to get out of that room before completely falling apart. I won't listen to any more of this. Damon will be here any minute, and I'm going to tell him about this conversation. Edward remained seated, completely calm. Tell him. But when you do, ask him if he's willing to sign an official document renouncing his inheritance to be with you. Ask him if he's willing to give up billions for love. And watch his expression carefully when you ask that question. Sierra stumbled out of the room, her hands trembling violently, her engagement ring feeling too heavy on her finger. She went back to her desk, but she couldn't concentrate on anything. Edward's words echoing in her mind, planting seeds of doubt she desperately tried to ignore, but which were beginning to grow and take over her thoughts, poisoning the perfect happiness she had built with Damon. What do you think will happen when Damon returns? And will Sierra be able to trust in the love they've built, or will her doubt destroy everything? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Sierra spent the rest of that afternoon trying to work normally, but Edward's words echoed in her mind like a poison that was slowly spreading throughout her being. Every time she looked at the engagement ring on her finger, she heard his cruel voice asking if Damon would really give up billions for love. When Damon finally returned from his meeting at 5 in the afternoon, with that radiant smile he always reserved for her, Sierra felt her heart break a little more. "My love, how was your day?" he asked, approaching her desk with the naturalness of someone who was used to showing affection openly. It was normal," Sierra lied, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Damon immediately realized something was wrong, the sensitivity he had developed toward her, allowing him to catch even the smallest changes in her mood. "Sierra, are you okay? You look pale." He moved closer, reaching out to touch her forehead, checking for a fever, but Sierra instinctively pulled away, the gesture cutting Damon like a blade. "I'm fine, just tired," Sierra said, avoiding looking directly at him. "Maybe you should go home early today." Damon frowned, clearly worried and confused by her distant behavior. "Okay, let's go now. We can have dinner together. You can rest." "No," Sierra interrupted more abruptly than she intended. I need to stay and finish some reports. You can go. I'll finish here." Damon stood by her desk for several seconds, studying her face, trying to understand what had changed between that morning, when she had kissed his cheek and told him she loved him, and now, when she could barely look at him. "Sierra, what happened? Did someone say something to you? You're scaring me." The genuine concern in his voice almost broke Sierra's defenses. It almost made her tell him everything about the conversation with his father. But Edward's words about Damon doing anything to get his heir prevented her from speaking. "Nothing happened. I'm just tired. Please, let me finish my work." Damon hesitated, clearly not convinced, but he respected her request. "Okay, but I'll pick you up at home at 8. I made that vegetable soup you said you were craving last night, and I want to make sure you're eating well." He leaned in to kiss her forehead, as he always did, but Sierra pulled away again, pretending to be busy with papers on her desk. The gesture was small, but devastating for Damon, who recoiled as if he had been punched. "Sierra," he began, but she was already typing furiously on the computer, clearly signaling that the conversation was over. Damon stood there for a few more seconds, then left the office with a heavy heart, not understanding what he had done wrong or why the woman he loved had suddenly started treating him like a stranger. Sierra waited until she heard the elevator close before allowing the tears she had been holding back to finally fall, wetting the documents on her desk as she cried silently. That night, when Damon arrived at Sierra's apartment at 8 o'clock sharp, as promised, he found a scene that completely destroyed him. Sierra was sitting at her small kitchen table with a stack of papers in front of her and a determined but pained expression on her face. "My love, I brought you dinner. I made that vegetable soup you said you were craving." Damon stopped talking when he saw the documents spread out on the table. They were copies of the original contract they had signed, the clauses highlighted with a yellow marker. "What is this?" he asked, though he already knew the answer, a terrible weight settling in his chest. "It's reality, Damon," Sierra said, her voice controlled but trembling. "It's what we really are, what we really have, a business contract, nothing more." Damon approached the table, seeing the clauses he had tried to forget ever since he had fallen in love with her. The resignation from her job, the separation after the birth, the $3 million. "Sierra, you know this means nothing to me now. Not after everything we've been through, everything we've felt for each other." Damon tried to take her hand, but Sierra pulled it away, placing it over her belly that still showed no signs of pregnancy. "It means everything, Damon. It's what reminds me of who I really am to you." She looked up to meet his eyes, and Damon saw a deep pain that made him feel as if someone were ripping his heart from his chest. "I'm a surrogate, an employee hired to bear your heir. Everything else, everything I thought existed between us, was just you doing what you needed to do to get what you wanted." The words came out as if she were reciting something she had memorized, and Damon immediately recognized his father's language. "My father spoke to you," he said. It wasn't a question. It was a statement filled with anger and despair. "What did he say to you? What lies did he tell?" Sierra got up from the chair, walking to the small window of her kitchen, turning her back to him. "He didn't tell lies, Damon. He showed me the truth. He showed me the clauses of your grandfather's will. He reminded me of what happens if you don't have an heir by your 36th birthday." Damon felt a violent fury toward his father, but he forced himself to stay calm, knowing that Sierra needed him to be calm in that moment. "Sierra, look at me, please." She turned slowly, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I love you. I love you more than any company, more than any inheritance, more than anything in this world. That contract means nothing to me now. I would tear it up right now if it would make you believe me." Sierra shook her head, sobbing. "You say that now, but what about when the time comes to choose? What about when you have to choose between me and billions of dollars? Between me and your family's legacy? Damon took a step toward her, but Sierra held up her hand, asking him to stop. Damon, I can't live with this doubt. I can't keep wondering if you really love me, or if you're just doing what you need to do to get your heir. Sierra took the engagement ring off her finger with trembling hands and placed it on the table. I can't do this anymore. The gesture was like a stab in Damon's heart, who looked at the ring as if it were his own death. Sierra, don't do this. Don't let my father destroy what we have. He's trying to separate us because he knows what we feel for each other is real. It's true. Damon approached her again, trying to take her hands. Marry me now. Today. Let's go to a courthouse and make our love official. I'll renounce the company. I'll give up everything to prove that you are more important to me than anything. Sierra looked at him with a pain so deep that Damon felt as if he were drowning in it. And then what? What about when you regret it? What about when you realize what you lost because of me? She shook her head, more tears falling. I can't be responsible for destroying your life. Sierra, you're not destroying my life. You are my life. Damon was desperate now, watching the woman he loved pulling away from him and not knowing how to stop it. Without you, none of it matters. The company, the money, none of it makes sense if you're not with me. Sierra walked to the bedroom, starting to throw some clothes into a small suitcase. What are you doing? Damon asked, following her. I'm leaving the city. I'm going to my Aunt Carol's house upstate. I need time to think, to decide what's best for all of us. Damon held her hand, stopping her from continuing to pack the suitcase. Sierra, don't go. We can work this out together. Don't leave me, please. She looked at him one last time, memorizing his face, trying to engrave in her memory the way he looked at her with so much love and despair. If you really love me, Damon, if what we feel is real, then this time will prove it. And if it's not. She didn't finish the sentence, but they both understood what she meant. An hour later, Damon was standing at the door of Sierra's empty apartment, holding the engagement ring she had left behind, feeling as if his entire life had collapsed in a matter of hours. Sierra was on a bus heading upstate, one hand on her belly, where their child was growing, crying silently as she moved away from the only man she had ever loved, not knowing if she could ever trust that love again. Neither of them slept that night, both wondering if they had just made the biggest mistake of their lives, but not knowing how to fix the damage that Edward Sterling's poisonous words had caused in their hearts. What do you think is the real meaning behind the pain of their separation? And do you think Damon will find a way to fix what his father has broken? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming stories. 6 months had passed since that devastating night. Sierra was living in the small upstate town of Hudson, in the house of her Aunt Carol, a kind woman who had taken her in without asking questions. Her belly was now large and round, clearly showing the life growing inside her, and she spent her days helping at the small local school where she had gotten a temporary job as an administrative assistant. It was a simple, quiet life, very different from the hustle and bustle of New York City. But Sierra still felt a deep emptiness in her heart that not even the happiness of feeling the baby move could completely fill. Every night before going to sleep, she would hold her belly and talk to her child, telling him about the father he had, about how Damon was a good man who would love him very much, even if they weren't together. Your daddy is an incredible man, my love, she would whisper, gently stroking her stretched skin. He's just confused right now, but he loves you as much as I love you. Damon, for his part, had spent the last 6 months in a state of utter despair. After Sierra left, he had confronted his father in a violent argument that almost resulted in physical assault. "You destroyed my life," he had yelled, punching the desk in Edward's office. "You drove away the only woman I have ever truly loved." Edward had tried to convince him that he had done what was best for the family, but Damon wouldn't listen. He had hired private investigators, visited at every town upstate where Sierra might have gone, called every hospital, looking for a pregnant woman with her name. The company began to suffer from his lack of focus. Employees whispered about how the boss had completely changed, becoming irritable and distant. "Mr. Sterling, you need to sign these contracts," his new temporary secretary would say. An efficient woman, but who didn't come close to the dedication and care that Sierra always showed. "Later," Damon would reply, looking out the window, imagining where Sierra was, how she was feeling, if the baby was developing well. It was on a rainy Friday morning that luck finally smiled on Damon. He was in a meeting with suppliers from an upstate town when he saw a pregnant woman walking through the main square. His heart almost stopped when he recognized the delicate walk, the brown hair blowing in the wind, the profile he had memorized in his dreams. "Sierra," he whispered, getting up abruptly from the meeting table, ignoring the confused looks of the businessmen. "Excuse me, I have to go," he said, running toward the door before anyone could protest. Damon ran out of the building, his dress shoes slipping on the rain-wet pavement, his eyes desperately searching for the figure he was sure he had seen. When he finally found her sitting on a bench in the square, sheltered by a small umbrella, he felt as if he could breathe for the first time in 6 months. She was even more beautiful, with that special glow that pregnant women have, her hands affectionately stroking her large belly, completely oblivious to his presence. Damon approached slowly, his heart beating so fast he could hear it in his ears. "Sierra," he said softly, stopping a few feet away from her. Sierra looked up and froze completely upon seeing him, as if she were seeing a ghost. "Damon," she whispered, her voice filled with shock and an emotion she was trying to hide. "What are you doing here?" Damon moved closer, observing how different she was, more mature, but with a sadness in her eyes that made him feel a physical pain in his chest. "I was looking for you. I've been looking for you every day for the last 6 months." Sierra got up from the bench with some difficulty due to the weight of her belly, and Damon instinctively held out his hands to help her, but she gestured for him not to come closer. "You shouldn't be here, Damon. We agreed it was better for us to be apart." Damon felt as if he had been punched in the stomach at the forced coldness in her voice. "Sierra, I need to talk to you. I need to explain some things. I need to tell you what happened after you left." "There's nothing to explain," Sierra said, trying to walk past him, but Damon blocked her path, not aggressively, but with the determination of a man who had found his last chance at happiness. "Please, just listen to me. 5 minutes. After that, if you want me to leave and never bother you again, I will respect your decision." Sierra hesitated, looking at his face and seeing a sincerity and desperation that touched her deeply. 5 minutes, she agreed, sitting back down on the bench. Damon sat down next to her, maintaining a respectful distance, but close enough to see every expression on her face. "Sierra, after you left, I confronted my father. I found out he had lied to you about many things." Sierra looked at him with skepticism. "What kind of lies?" Damon took a deep breath, knowing he only had one chance to get this right. "He said I was just using you to get an heir, that I would do anything to charm a woman when I needed something from her. But that's not true, Sierra. I've loved you for 2 years, long before there was any pressure for an heir." Sierra felt her heart race, but she forced herself to keep her guard up. "How can I be sure of that, Damon? How can I know you're not just saying this because you found me pregnant with your child?" Damon took a crumpled envelope from the inside pocket of his jacket, a paper that seemed to have been folded and unfolded many times. Because I renounced the company, Sierra, officially, 4 months ago. He handed the document to her, watching her eyes widen as she read it. You did what? She whispered, looking alternately at the paper and at him. I renounced everything. The company, the inheritance, the sterling name. My cousin Robert took control, exactly as my father feared. Sierra was reading the document in disbelief, seeing that he had truly given up billions of dollars. Damon, why did you do that? You lost everything. Damon looked at her with an intensity that made her tremble. I didn't lose everything, Sierra. I lost you, and without you, none of that mattered. Sierra was crying openly now, one of her hands covering her mouth, the other still holding the document. You did this? You really did this for me? Damon nodded, carefully reaching out a hand to wipe a tear that was streaming down her cheek. I did this for us, for you, for me, for our child. Because a life without you isn't a life. It's just existing. Sierra didn't pull away from his touch this time. In fact, she leaned into the hand that was caressing her face. Damon, I've missed you so much. Every day, every night. Then come back to me, Damon pleaded, his voice full of hope and vulnerability. Marry me, not because I need an heir, not because of contracts or family pressure, but because I love you more than my own life. Sierra looked into his eyes, seeing the truth there, seeing the love that had always been present, but which she had allowed Edward's poisonous words to cloud. Damon, she began, but she was interrupted by a strong contraction that made her double over in pain. Ah! She cried out, one of her hands instinctively going to her belly. Damon stood up immediately, his hands trembling with worry. Sierra, what is it? Is it the baby? Another contraction, stronger than the first, and Sierra felt a warm liquid running down her legs. Damon, she said, looking at him with a mix of pain and panic. I think the baby is coming. Damon didn't hesitate for a second. He picked her up in his arms, carrying her toward the car he had rented, yelling to the people in the square. Can someone give me directions to the nearest hospital? My wife is in labor! And in that moment, Sierra knew with absolute certainty that he loved her, that he had always loved her, and that everything they had been through had made them even stronger. The hospital in the small town of Hudson had never seen so much emotion concentrated in a single room. Damon held Sierra's hand during every contraction, whispering words of encouragement and love in her ear, his own eyes full of tears as he watched the woman he loved go through the most intense experience of her life. You're doing great, my love. Our baby is almost here, he would say, kissing her sweaty forehead, completely in awe of her strength and courage. Sierra squeezed his hand, with a strength he didn't know she possessed, but her eyes were fixed on his, finding all the security and love she needed to get through that moment. Damon, I love you, she managed to say between two contractions. I love you so much, and I'm so sorry for doubting your love. Damon kissed her hands repeatedly, his voice choked with emotion. You don't have to apologize for anything, Sierra. You were just protecting your heart. I understand. The local doctor, a seasoned woman who had seen many births, smiled as she watched the palpable love between the couple. It's beautiful to see such true love, she commented. This baby is coming into a home full of love. When they finally heard the first strong, healthy cry of their son, both Sierra and Damon began to cry uncontrollably. It's a beautiful, perfect baby boy, the doctor announced, placing the baby on Sierra's chest. Damon looked at the small being who was half of him and half of the woman he loved, feeling his heart expand in a way he didn't know was possible. Look at him, Sierra. Look at our son. The baby had Damon's dark eyes and already showed signs of having Sierra's brown hair. His small hands moved in the air, as if he were trying to reach the parents who were watching him with so much love. "He's perfect," Sierra whispered, gently stroking the baby's pink cheek. "He is our proof that true love always wins." Damon extended a finger to his son, who immediately grabbed it with surprising strength. "Look at that! He's already strong like his mother," Damon said, laughing through his tears. "Gabriel," Sierra said suddenly. "Let's call him Gabriel." Damon looked at her with surprise and joy. "Like my name?" Sierra nodded, smiling. "Gabriel Sterling Jones. He'll carry the names of the two parents who love him more than anything." 3 days later, they were leaving the hospital as an official family. Damon had managed to find a local priest to perform a simple but moving wedding ceremony right there in the hospital, with Gabriel sleeping in Sierra's arms as they exchanged vows. "I, Damon Sterling, promise to love you, Sierra Jones, in all the moments of our life, in joys and sorrows, in richness and poverty, in health and in sickness," he said, placing a simple golden band on her finger. "I promise to be the husband you deserve, and the father our son deserves, every day of my life." Sierra, with tears streaming down her cheeks, replied, "I, Sierra Jones, promise to love you, Damon Sterling, with all my heart. I promise to trust in our love, even when the world tries to tear us apart. I promise to be your wife and partner for all eternity." When the priest declared them husband and wife, the kiss they shared was witnessed not only by the few people present, but by the baby who had made it all possible, as if it were a divine blessing on their new beginning. Damon had bought a small but cozy house in Hudson, deciding that this peaceful town was the perfect place to raise his family. "Are you sure you won't miss the busy life of New York City?" Sierra asked him, as they organized the baby's room, decorated with much love and care. "Sierra, I spent years living a life that wasn't really mine," Damon replied, assembling the crib while watching her fold Gabriel's tiny clothes. "Now I have a real life, with real purpose, with real love. My consulting firm is growing. I have clients who respect my work, and I wake up every day next to the woman I love and the child who is our miracle. How could I miss anything?" Sierra approached him and kissed him softly, Gabriel sleeping peacefully in her arms. "I love you, husband," she said, testing how the words sounded. "I love how that sounds," Damon replied, hugging his small family. "Husband, wife, son, we are a real family now." The following months were the happiest of both their lives. Damon proved to be a completely dedicated father, waking up in the middle of the night to help with Gabriel, singing lullabies in a soft voice that always made the baby stop crying, and changing diapers with the competence of someone who had studied every parenting manual available. Sierra watched him with admiration, seeing how the man who had once been known for his coldness in business completely melted when he held their son. "You're an incredible father," she said one morning, watching Damon give Gabriel a bottle while singing softly. "I learned from the best mother in the world," he replied, looking at her with so much love that Sierra felt as if she would faint with happiness. In those moments, Sierra was absolutely sure that they had made all the right decisions, that every difficulty they had faced had led them exactly to where they were meant to be. A year after Gabriel's birth, as they watched their son take his first wobbly steps between them in their garden, Sierra reflected on the incredible journey they had taken. "Do you remember when all this started?" she asked Damon, as Gabriel laughed and tried to walk toward his dad. "I remember every moment," Damon replied, picking up Gabriel when he finally reached him, I remember the despair I felt when I thought I was going to lose you. I remember every tear, every doubt, every moment of pain." He looked at Sierra, then at Gabriel, "And I remember every moment of joy, every discovery, every 'I love you' we exchanged." Sierra approached the two men in her life, creating a family hug that had become her favorite place in the world. "Sometimes God has plans so much bigger than we can imagine," she said, watching Gabriel play with the buttons on his dad's shirt. "He even used a business contract to unite us forever." Damon kissed the top of Sierra's head, then Gabriel's forehead. "Our son will grow up knowing that he was raised in the purest love, that his parents fought for that love and overcame every obstacle to be together," he said, his voice filled with gratitude and happiness. "He'll know that true love exists, that it's worth waiting for and fighting for." Sierra smiled, looking at the simple wedding band on her finger, which meant so much more to her than any expensive diamond ever could. Gabriel will grow up knowing that his mother found a man who loves her more than any wealth in the world, and that his father found a woman who loves him for the man he truly is, not for what he possesses. In that moment, with the sun setting over their small house, with Gabriel laughing in his arms and Damon by her side, Sierra knew they had found something much more valuable than $3 million. They had found true, lasting happiness, built on the most solid foundation that exists, genuine and unconditional love. And so, dear listeners, we come to the end of another story that teaches us that God always has a perfect plan for our lives, even when we can't see it. Sierra and Damon discovered that true love cannot be bought. It cannot be contracted. It cannot be forced. It simply exists. It grows and it flourishes when two hearts meet at the right time. May this story inspire you to believe in the transformative power of love, to never give up on your dreams, and to trust that even in the most difficult moments, God is preparing something wonderful for you. Thank you for joining me on this emotional journey. Leave your comments telling us how this story touched your hearts. Subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories, and share this love with people who need to hear that miracles still happen every day. Until the next story, may God bless you and your families abundantly.